I'm excited to be joined by Marty Heflin. He's a leader in real estate, professor at Vanderbilt, and an advocate for new urbanism. He's celebrated for his award-winning work in multifamily and mixed-use developments, including Nashville's own historic Stallman building. He's brought in well over $400 million in projects to life. And why don't you go ahead and tell me what kind of inspired you to pursue real estate development, and how did new urbanist principles become a core part of your work?
Well, thank you, Brett. Real privilege to be with you. So I've been in real estate development for a little over 30 years. I started my career when I first left undergraduate at Vanderbilt University. I was going to be a career naval officer, and along the way decided that marriage and having kids and all that was a little more exciting future prospects. So left the fleet after about 5 years of active duty and went back to graduate school, Wake Forest, and got my MBA. And then coming out of there, I actually wanted to go into real estate. I was really interested. I'd been talking to the guys with the Trammell Crow Company down in Charlotte. And then they put the offer on the table. And here I was with my first child on the way. And I had RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company on one side offering me a lot of money, and Trammell Crow on the other side offering not very much. So my real estate career was delayed for a few years while I learned how to be a tobacco marketeer. Fast forward several years, and I was in the airport in Atlanta coming back from a focus group in Tampa, as I recall. And I was consuming adult beverages because I hated my life. And at the other end of the bar were some guys celebrating. In fact, quickly learned it was a closing, and one of the gentlemen was actually the guy that had originally recruited me for Trammell Crow. And we started chatting, and the rest is history. They had started a residential group, and next thing I knew, I was on my way down to Orlando, Florida, to learn on the job how to develop multifamily housing. So that's kind of my background. The love for new urbanism came probably Kotkin's book, if I remember correctly. I think the Geography of No, or was it who wrote Geography of Nowhere? I'm trying to remember. And that just made me realize that everywhere you go in America, and I joke with my wife about this as we drive around, it's like, you get off the interstate and it looks exactly the same. There's the Chick-fil-A, there's the McDonald's, there's the strip mall, there's the gas station. It all looks drearily the same. And frankly, a lot of our residential architecture looks the same. And frankly, a lot of our office looks the same. But I was inspired by Dwayne Plater-Zyberk and that whole crowd early on in the days of the new urbanist movement to try and explore integrating walking and health into communities. Been trying to do that for a long time. I'm not sure I've been super successful yet, but I've built quite a few walking trails, a lot of dog parks, a lot of open spaces in our communities that hopefully make the residential experience a lot better.
That's awesome. What brought you back to Vanderbilt? How'd you get back there?
Great question. So we Orlando, if you're not familiar with, the whole concept of going to Florida was I'd be able to play golf 3 or 4 times a week. I think in the 3 years we were there, I think I played golf twice. And Orlando is just an extremely transient community. I've been blessed. My wife of 40 years is a DC gal, and she likes seasons and winter and leaves falling and all that. And we were at the Winter Park Christmas parade. Suddenly, my wife of iron constitution, I had our little 1-year-old up on my shoulders, and my wife of iron constitution was sniffling, and I looked at her and said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I hate this place." I said, "Well, good gracious, what's going on?" She goes, "Santa Claus is in shorts. I want seasons, damn it." So I talked to the senior partner at Atlanta about it. Said, if something comes available, we'd sure be interested in possibly a transfer. I'll never forget. He said, "Well, we've got this division that's kind of struggling up in Nashville." And I said, "Done. Send me in. I'm on it." He had forgotten that both my wife and I had gone to Vanderbilt. So it was like, boop, there we were, back to Nashville. Was invited to be a guest lecturer. We were building a community right across the street from the business school called 20 and Grand, and was invited to be a guest lecturer about that project for the gentleman that was teaching real estate at the time. One thing kind of led to another, and I've been over there teaching for almost 20 years now. So just love it. It's great. It keeps me young, keeps me on my toes, keeps me fresh.
That's awesome. The only information I know about Nashville is I was able to go to the Biz Now meetups there in Hotel One, and I saw the strip with all the music. The music scene is awesome.
Yeah, we are blessed, and it's not just country music anymore either. We have a very, very fine classical orchestra with an incredible symphony hall. being Nashville and being very picky, the designers of the hall said that it had to be as near to acoustically perfect as possible. And it is one of it's pretty darn close. It's about as true as you'll hear in, maybe an opera hall in Vienna might get a little bit better, but not much.
So, what does most of your portfolio consist of?
So primarily I'm a merchant builder. So I really own very little on right now I have a 158 unit community that's a really cool blend of townhomes and apartments called Meridian Park over in East Nashville. It had been a trailer park in an area that is rapidly improving. We had to go through jump a lot of hurdles with the city to get that over the goal line, but it's turned out to be a very successful community. We're holding on to it right now just because, we thought we'd sell at the height of the market, but candidly, we started construction right after COVID, right as COVID was hitting, right as COVID was hitting. It was a struggle. Just keeping crews on site, keeping the site open, avoiding outbreaks. The supply chain got all balled up, I'm sure you know. So we lost, just a case in point, we had one building that's 24 units up, kind of fronting the street, sort of framing one of the streets that the property sits between, Leashy Avenue. And we were ready to bring it online, and Nashville Electric Service had no transformer. So we called them up, said, "Hey, plug us in." I said, "It's going to be a while." That cost us almost 4 months till we got a transformer.
Oh, wow.
And then when we finally got the transformer, we found out that because of all the surrounding development nearby, water pressure in the street had actually dropped. It was still slightly above their code requirement of what they were to deliver from the street to our property. But to get it up to the third story to man fire sprinklers up there, we then had to buy a pump. And guess where naval quality pumps are made? And they're no longer made in the United States. They're made in Hungary. And guess what had just started over there was the Ukraine war. So once again, international affairs kind of threw everything into a cocked hat. But we finally got it going. So and it's been very successful once we were able to start delivering product. It's been very well received.
Speaking on market volatility and all these downturns and timing mishaps, how do you approach market volatility and economic downturns in your investment strategy?
Well, I go into it first off trying to understand where we are in the real estate cycle. Anytime we're looking, we spend quite a bit of time in our shop studying the factors behind where are we. What's job growth looking like? What's job creation looking like? What are average wages and salaries looking like? Where are these trends? We obviously look at the usual suspects of interest rates and what their trend lines look like. And we pay very close attention to the spreads between cap rates and the 10-year treasuries, just as an understanding of that movement. One of the great tells of the crash of '08 was when cap rates, even though things seemed to be going very well in the marketplace and houses were selling and we were delivering communities and we were selling a lot of condominiums at the time. But disturbingly, I remember being on a flight back from Denver. We had opened an office out there in Denver, Colorado, and we'd done one small deal in Littleton, Colorado that sold very, very well. Wanted to follow up with a slightly larger deal, got the land under contract, got everything going, and sales were just flat, nothing. Nobody coming into the sales center. And I was flying back after meeting with my partner out there, and I was on the plane back to Nashville. And I pulled up that chart the weekly chart that I kind of keep as my little go-to, and realized that cap rates were doing they were opening up a spread up over interest rates. I said, somebody's pricing in a lot of risk. And we were too busy just delivering product and building and doing and executing to be paying close attention to what was coming down the pike at us. Spent the next week kind of in several deep huddles. We had a big project down in Murfreesboro that we were getting ready to get going, that we were struggling a little bit on financing, but not a whole lot. We had a huge project downtown that we were in a joint venture with on a tower downtown, and ended up pulling the plug on both of those, and then pulled the plug on the Littleton project as well. And honestly, Brett, thank God we did. The Littleton we could have survived. The tower downtown and the 360 units in Murfreesboro would have crushed us. We got lucky on that one. So I pay attention. Bottom line is that's one of the leading indicators I keep a close eye on, is average cap rates in my food group and in my geography. And they differ, as you know, differs in where you are. So I always encourage young developers to keep a close eye on those numbers.
Looking at the market trends, can you describe your overall investment strategy?
My overall investment, as I've gotten older, currently my partner and I, we're actually looking at doing build to own as kind of a big shift versus you know, build and sell. But we've traditionally been doing very large communities. So, and I say large, I mean not like not like the days when I was with Trammell Crow, you know, 560 unit apartment deals, more in the 150, 200 unit range. We're scaling back, and we actually have several projects in our pre-development right now. One is like 16 unit townhomes, another is a 40 unit townhome, and we're looking at that as build to rent. So we would own the communities ourselves and actually develop it as pretty low risk development strategy rather than bringing in a joint venture partner to, you know, raise the 40% of the equity and, you know, finance the whole cost up front. We're basically looking at taking out a much smaller land and development loan and then using our line of credit to deliver units on a sort of like 5, 6 units at a time and work our way. It's a little less efficient, but at the end of the day, we end up owning it 100% as opposed to having to dilute with a partner. We're closely looking at that right now. It's not a go yet, but we're in pre-development. We're pretty excited about the initial projections that we have for that.
What's been your most successful investment? Has it been the actual largest investments you've done, or is it more just a surprise?
My most, probably bar none, made the most money, most successful, biggest return ever was my first condominium project on Music Row. It was called 807 18th. It was a combination of stacked townhomes, very unusual looking. They look like brownstones from the street. It won some nice design awards. Urban Land Institute gave it a nice award. And then it was built around a courtyard that were flats in the back. And when we first started that project, we were told, you know, all the investment people were like, this is nuts. No one wants to live on Music Row. That whole area is just, you know, it's crime ridden. Well, you're crazy. Well, we were actually the first ones in. And as a result, the average sale price on that was they were in the 300s. And we delivered the project for less than 100 a unit. So yeah, that was a very nice payday. So from a dollar perspective, that was probably the most successful on a blow by blow. I've made more money on, you know, large deals, which you sell a massive deal, but you know, you're only a 25% partner in that. But you know, there's, you know, $60 million of profits to spread around. It's okay. That's not a bad day.
So I've always been interested in development and specifically working with the architects. Do you work closely with architects? Do you build it out yourself, or do you have close
Yes.
partnerships?
Anytime I have to do a project like that, there's some, you know, I've done some small projects like duplexes and some small townhome stuff where we could basically get floor plans off the net that we liked and get a local draftsman to stamp the plan so you could get them through codes. But anything larger than that, the risk is just too great. You've got to have an architect on your team. So yes, I've worked with a number of architects around the country. Worked with several Houston architects back in the day. Trammell Crow typically had a stable of ones that we would go to and kind of dole the projects out from the partners around the country. And Atlanta and Houston were kind of hotbeds for, well, Dallas too, actually, come to think of it, for hotbeds for that. But I love working with the good ones. The challenge with architects, they will not be insulted when I say this, is they want to win awards. And I always tell them, I want to win awards too. I want you to win awards, but we have to be able to afford to build it. I always, you know, I go in with like very specific vision ideas of what I want the thing to look like, as opposed to just saying, draw me a building. You know, spend time on the various and sundry architectural websites, see something that I like that I think will fit with the neighborhood, looks consistent with the area, and has a nice feel about it. And also something that I could potentially, for example, if I'm in a rezoning effort, that I'm going to be able to show planning commissioners and aldermen and whatnot, this is what it's going to look like. It's not going to offend the neighborhood if I build this. And I always tell the architects, you know, let's design a Chevrolet. I want it to end up being a Cadillac, but let's design a Chevrolet and add on. It's much harder to design, you know, the super Cadillac EX, and you fall in love with it and it looks great and everything. Oh man, I want to build this. And then you get the first round of pricing back from your contractors and say, Jesus, what am I can't afford to build this thing. It's crazy. And so you know, then you're, you know, the old value engineering, you have chop, 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 chop. And it just doesn't feel good. I like it a lot better where we get it. The base price comes in with a little bit of wiggle room and you start saying, okay, we've got granite on those countertops. What if we went to quartz? How much would that add? And you know, now we've got some pizzazz on the interior that we can sell, and moving on up. What if we added a dog park instead of just a dog walking station? What if we had like a full-blown dog park now? Things like that.
So how do you balance the risk and return in all of your investments?
Ooh, that is the ultimate question, isn't it? The risk versus the return. At the start with your due diligence and in the underwriting phase of the deal during pre-development, we are always pressure testing our numbers, and we're pretty open about sharing them. I've got several bankers that I've done a lot of business with, lenders that I've good friends that we've become through the years, that I have no shame in sending over a pro forma and saying, hey, if you saw this coming at you in a full-blown pitch book, what would you say? Because we're thinking about moving, pushing this ball down the road. And if you can, unless you see a major, and I've had bankers call me up and say, I'll do this deal if you're willing to put in, 50% equity. Tell me why you're seeing this measure of risk. What am I missing? And have that conversation. Ditto with my, I have a stable of investors that follow me, and I'm blessed to have them. They're great folks. And I just talk to them about the project. This is what I'm seeing. This is a trend I'm seeing. And they're not bashful, even though several of them are not even in real estate. They're not bashful about challenging the assumptions and saying, yeah, but what if this happens? What if that happens? At the end of the day, before the project moves forward, my partner and I write, we call it the partner letter, and it is the assessment of risk. And we go by every single, we look at environmental. Is there an environmental risk? And what have we done to ameliorate it? Is there a physical risk? Are we dealing with potential soils and costs overruns because we might hit rock? How are we addressing that? Are we dealing? What is our market risk? Here's the supply and demand picture. Here's the rent trend picture. We review it. So all of that we have to each other. We have to sort of commit and sign in blood at the end that we have evaluated each of these risk steps along the way and arrived at something that makes sense.
So what is the role of liquidity playing into your investment decisions?
Oh, great question. As you know, real estate is a very illiquid business, right? We actually joke about, how many months do we have in the bank? And we keep reserve funds. I always remember when I first made partner in Trammell Crow, and we were at a little partner celebration dinner with Trammell down in Dallas. And I had the opportunity of I was actually sitting next to him for a little bit while we were having some adult beverages. And I turned to him and I said, Trammell, what would you tell a young partner? What's the best advice you could give a young partner that I should live with? And he turned to me and he said, didn't miss a beat. He said, don't buy the jet. I said, understood. Between taxes and problems that you're going to encounter, you're going to need the liquidity. So keep big reserves on hand. Never get overcommitted, and also keep your lines of credit fed. Make sure those are ready to go in case you need them. Yeah, that's probably, don't buy the jet.
That's great advice. Keeping as much liquidity as possible.
When in an organization like that, when you first hit, you hit your first few home runs, and actually you gotta, you're looking at your partnership account and you're going, dang, I'm a wealthy man. No, you're not. You're just at risk. But yeah, so people have made that mistake and then found very quickly that a lease on a jet is a pain in the ass.
I know jets specifically. I looked into them once, and then I immediately saw the gas price for, I don't know, 1,000 miles. And I was like, oh, okay.
I can fly commercial. I'm fine with that. Not ashamed.
So you have a vast array of assets. What factors do you consider when diversifying your portfolio?
Well, I'm diversified outside of real estate too. I mean, I've invested in crypto. I've not made a lot of money at it, but I've played with that game. I certainly have some precious metals set aside as just in cases. I have a fairly healthy portfolio of stock investments. Curiously, I invest a lot in REITs just because their information's great. So, you're a shareholder in a REIT and they're sending you all this free information that I can use in my own business. So yeah, I try to stay pretty balanced. And obviously I am, as you get older, I mean, I'm 65 now and you're starting to kind of stare down the pike. I'm blessed to have parents that are in their 90s. So in the genetic lottery, I've probably should have a little bit more runway. But you still have to be thinking through, legacy issues that you want to have in the future, whether it's to an institution or a cause, and certainly your children and grandchildren as you get older. So you start to look at ways. How do I start to trim risk off some of these other things.
And how do you review and adjust your portfolio? How often?
So primarily, I am a fire and forget investor. I look at it probably once a quarter, just kind of scan through. I do not have a professional financial advisor. Done it myself for 40 plus years. I look at it, and then once a year is when I kind of, depending on whether it's typically in October, sometimes in January, I'll go through and just say, okay, I like to fire and forget, but I clearly missed on this one. Let's just dump it. Get rid of it and keep some liquidity in reserve for opportunities that might show up. I love investing in small companies that look like they're building neat products. There's some defense companies out there that are, going to give Lockheed Martin a run for their business one day, because they're doing anti-drone warfare, for example, and just real cutting edge stuff that just stuff the size of a small mailbox that can take out a fleet of drones. Like, all right, that's like
Wow.
something the government's going to come in and buy that, and you're going to make a lot of money, and I want to be along for the ride. So
I don't know if you've heard about the potential for unrealized capital gains taxes. How do you manage the impact of regulatory changes on your investments?
I hope I'm not whistling past the graveyard. I think that would be an enormous, enormous mistake. Don't think that it would be able to get through Congress. And I think it would be litigated for such a long time that I probably won't be around. If it were to come to pass, I probably won't be around for that it could be implemented. It's insane.
Oh yeah.
Unrealized capital gains. Who's going to provide the valuation? I own a house that I bought, 40 years ago, that I bought for, $200,000, that according to the tax assessor says it's now worth almost $2 million. So are you going to say, okay, I got to pay capital gains on that delta? I don't think so. That having been said, I mean, gosh, if it looks like it were about to pass, I would surprise. I guess you get liquid fast.
Yeah. Talk about
I think
capital
that's
flight. I
about
mean,
the only way out, right? I'm not a very good prognosticator on things politics, but I mean, everything I'm reading right now, it does not look like the purveyor of that particular poison pill is going to be successful here in a few weeks. So
yeah.
I think we may be seeing a return to a lot of entertainment, but maybe some fiscal sanity as well. So let's hope so.
I couldn't imagine what it would do to the stocks. I mean, the Magnificent Seven are kind of keeping it afloat right now, and if people
Exactly.
run from that, we're kind of on a
Yeah,
downturn anyways.
exactly. It's absolute nuts. Yeah.
So how
So
do
no,
you
I'm excited. Yeah.
measure your performance of your investment portfolio?
My usual measure in terms of real estate, when I'm pitching deals and what I want to see in my deals, you can run IRRs and XIRRs, but I typically look at the multiple on capital. If it's we sort of our baseline go no go is like, if it's not a 1.8 to 1.9 minimum, it's not worth the risk, because IRRs are just so well. I mean, the Meridian Park is a great example. That deal I was just telling you about, that with all the delays, the IRRs, when we delivered the pitch book, the IRRs were in the 30s for the LPs and much higher for the GPs. But obviously, that's not going to be the case. However, if we get close to the strike point of the book of value that a broker recently said he thinks we could sell it for, we'd be in the 2x plus multiple on capital. So that's a happy day.
And without all these delays or any odd events happening, how do you decide when to sell an investment?
Ideally, you're selling when the market, if you time it right, and it's very, very difficult to do, as you know, in real estate, but if you time it right, and you can start construction, like candidly, right now would be an awesome time to start construction in Nashville, because we've gone through this massive absorption of units. You can see people are nervous about doing it, but they're starting to let concessions burn off, and rents are going to start climbing up. If you could be delivering into the early stages of that as it's going up, investors are going to pay up on the assumption that they'll be the ones that will profit from the rent increase. And so you have been delivering at a point in time where your GCs are hungry for business, so their margins are going to be down, and your bottom line is you'll be delivering same product at a slightly cheaper price, and then potentially selling into that upturn. it doesn't always work out that way, but and unfortunately, because information flow is not perfect, it's hard. But yeah, I think that's the best time to do it. Worst time to do it is when things have started to turn south, and your conventional investors, your pension funds, those guys have left the marketplace. The only people out there at that point in time are the bottom fishers. Now Sam Zell made a lot of money being, in fact, his nickname back in the day was Grave Dancer. He made a lot of money with people, to your earlier question about liquidity, that ran out of liquidity and the deal was sideways and they couldn't afford to carry it anymore. And, bad times, bad things happened. So that's about the worst time to sell, is when there are those that are out there that are not afraid to catch the falling knife because they know long term they're going to own the asset for an extended period of time, and they're just buying into the downturn. They're buying into that downturn. And you as a seller, if you're desperate, you're out. That's the good news, and you live to fight another day. The bad news is you probably left a lot of money on the table.
And the balance of short-term financial needs, how do you balance that with the long-term investment goals?
Well, there again, it's sort of really liquidity, maintain, just making sure that, I try to keep, just from a personal perspective, we try to keep at least a year's worth of expenses in the bank, that, some CDs and whatnot, but things that are constantly rolling, that, if we hit a cash crunch, I can cash out that CD at the start of next month, get that cash infusion in. And so, yeah, I try to keep a rolling 1 year of expenses for personal uses there. Business wise, we just try to keep, we don't have a lot of operational expenses. We don't pay ourselves salaries. We just, we're purely deal based. So we, what we kill, we eat. And, but we do try to maintain, keep our lines of credit clean, and nothing on them, just, there if we need them, and have certainly had to resort to using them. I know, 08, 09, kind of that period from like 08 till about 11, those were some pretty dry years. And we got to where things were starting to get a little scary. I was like, man, things are getting tight. But we never got to the point where we were actually having to sell in a distressed situation just to raise cash. So we were lucky in that regard. But it was thin, and you don't take big vacations, and you don't buy the new car, and you just so I
Definitely not the jet.
a couple of years. Yeah, get rid of the jet. Exactly.
So, as you know, the market's been wild the past couple of years. What's your biggest problem or issue you're facing in regards to your business or investing at this moment?
From a business perspective right now, I think the biggest problem continues to be construction costs. They're still too high. Subcontractors still think they're starting to get the memo, but they're not there yet. These subcontractors through the fat times were making, 35, 40% margins. And they need to understand that they need to get back to I want them to make a lot of money. I don't have a problem with that. But you can make a lot of money with a 25% margin as opposed to a 40% margin. You're still making a lot of money. And I can actually get the project done. So I think that's one of a lot of people complain about the interest rates, but I've been in too many cycles to say, listen, these interest rates are not high. I still, my first car that I purchased when I was in the Navy, we all had to we used to jokingly call them ensign mobiles, had to get the sports car, and I had great credit. And, I got a steal with a 16% loan on a car. It's like, wow, man, that's a deal. Regular folks off the street were, being billed 18, 19%. Mortgages back then, 9.5, 10%. And some even higher, depending on, which credit risk was. So that's a high interest rate environment. And, part of that was we were in the middle of the early Reagan years where they were trying to kill what had really become rampant inflation. The inflation we've seen over the last couple of years has mirrored some of that, but it does seem to be tapering off. I think the Fed chair, Jerry Powell, I think he got it just about right, honestly. I think he throttled up when he might have throttled up a little bit too late, but no, interest rates are not the problem. It's construction cost is the big one. Land sellers are getting the memo that times have changed, and so pricing has come off. As I look at sort of on a per unit basis, during the go-go times, a suburban, just 2 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, suburban quality apartment site would be 35, 40K a door. And I'm seeing sites like that right now hovering in the 25 to 30 range, which is still in my mind too much, but it's a big improvement. And so we can start to deliver some more affordable product that way.
So do you think you can time that, or is it too difficult to judge?
I think it's kind of like surfing. You think you got the right wave as you see it coming in, but sometimes the damn thing just peters out, and sometimes it turns out to be a monster. But the best you can do is kind of keep an educated eye looking at the pattern and saying, okay, this is probably about as good as it's going to get, and feel comfortable that at the end of the day, it underwrote to the specs that, to what you said it was going to do. And it delivered the return that you said it was going to do. Yeah, if you'd waited 6 months, it might have gotten better, but waited 6 months, you might never have gotten it done. So you just gotta go with your gut in a lot of these things too.
Yes, sir. Do you prefer active or passive investing?
Oh, passive, definitely. No, I mean that's the way to go if you can do it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with active investing, but I prefer getting things as much as possible treated through capital gains, taxation rates, and that type of thing. So hold it while you can, and then take advantage of take advantage of the depreciation and all the rest of it that comes with ownership of real estate. It's a good deal. I mean, at the end of the day, the old rule of thumb, the going in cap rate has got to be 200 basis points higher than the exit cap rate, and you'll make some real money.
And speaking on taxes, do you incorporate any other tax considerations into your investment decisions?
Real estate property taxes, definitely. It's funny. We just looked at something. I haven't looked at deals in Memphis in probably 5, 6 years, but there was a pretty interesting deal that involved. It was a really a rundown community, but in an area that's improving in Midtown. And we drove over and looked at it, and the acquisition price really was very favorable, and we felt we could value add and renovate the place and turn it into something pretty cool. But once we factored in property taxes in Memphis, it's crazy. You just can't it's not worth the risk. Just too much cost, too much to operate over there, which is sad because Memphis used to be kind of the darling in Tennessee. Nashville took that crown probably 20 plus years ago and hadn't looked back.
Do any of your investments ever go into high risk, high reward, or are you more of a conservative
I
investor?
tend to be pretty conservative. I mean, being a real estate developer is enough risk for me. I mean, that life in and of itself is kind of riverboat gambler-esque, but no, I try to stay away from the super hype. You're going to get 5-time return if you invest in. No, something never smells right to me, and I've seen too many people get burned with that. So no, I try to keep it pretty close to the center of the fairway is kind of where I like to be.
With the story of the historic Stallman building, is that your favorite investment, or what has been your favorite investment?
So the Stallman building is just a great story. That was a joint venture with us and a local company called the Matthews Company. It was an office building. It was built in 1906. The architect was a gentleman named James Carpenter. And Carpenter was the first licensed architect in the state of Tennessee. He attended Vanderbilt University, MIT, and Académie des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And here in Nashville, he was the architect behind the Hermitage Hotel, which is still to this day a 5-star hotel, the Stallman Building, and the Joint University Library Building at Vanderbilt. When he finished that, he was given a commission to build a building in New York City. And of the buildings he built up there, that's the only one that's been torn down. That's where the Guggenheim Museum sits. But if you stand in Central Park and look around at all those apartment buildings in Central Park, primarily 2 architects did all those buildings, and James Carpenter was one of them. So Tennessee boy done good. And we really felt like we owed it to him. It was such a tragic, it was great what we were able to achieve with the building and really bringing its historicity back to life. But you got to love the 1950s, man. Those drop ceilings where they covered these beautiful coffered ceilings, vinyl wallpaper over the marble, vinyl tile over the top of Grecian tile floors. I mean, we were just finding it was just a work of love to get in there and start tearing this thing apart and putting it back together. Really cool. I've got I've got some pictures of there were pieces of tile of excuse me, of marble that was lined the walls, and Carpenter himself was like writing on the back of them, third floor, second panel, right side, and then signed JRC. It was like, oh,
That's cool.
it was just send chills up your spine. Some of the stuff that we did down there, and it turned out to be very successful. It's probably the most complex capital stack we've ever put together. We had obviously we had our equity. We had historic tax credits, a mezzanine loan from the Nashville Housing Fund. We had conventional debt. Oh, and we had to work out this very complex arrangement we had with the city because there was no parking. And so the city ended up sort of using the fact that the Stallman building was coming down the pike to go ahead and kick off this massive project across the street from us that became this downtown urban square in front of the courthouse with the Stallman building on the other side. And underneath it's 5 levels of parking, a 100-year lease on the spaces that front the Stallman side. So all the resident has to do is walk across the street and go down the stairs in their parking garage.
That's serendipity right there.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
What other markets are you in? Are you just in Tennessee?
Yeah. I have built in, I was started in Orlando. I have built in the Carolinas. I've built up in DC, metro area. I've built in Kentucky and in Indiana. But no, these days I'm primarily focused here. We have a rule of thumb that a 3-hour drive time. So we're looking at a couple of smaller deals. Well, actually, one very large deal down in Priceville, Alabama, that's about an hour, just about an hour from here, south of here. Huntsville's become a major hub of very high income, very highly educated rocket scientists, literally rocket scientists, because that's where the Huntsville engineering facilities down there. Plus, the Army has a big facility down there now. And so there's a result, there's some suburbs that are starting to build out, and there's one down there that we're keeping a very close eye on called Priceville that makes a lot of sense, and we're chasing something down there on that one. But primarily, we've got enough between the two of us at our age that we're very comfortable just chasing deals here in Nashville. We'll go, we were up in Clarksville earlier this week. That's 45 minutes from here, looking at a deal up there that a friend of ours has. But yeah, we tend to try to stay close to home.
With decades of experience, what shifts have you seen or observed in the multifamily mixed-use development space? What trends are you actually excited about right now?
Given where we are with housing prices right now, I think there's a lot of runway with the build-to-rent idea, where developers are actually building look like regular old suburban subdivisions, but they own 100% of them and they're rented. And young families can afford to do that, but where they don't have the cash to get a down payment on. The mixed use urban building wherein you have the frontage on the street that is retail or some other kind of commercial use and then residential on top. I'm not sure that model hasn't run its course. A lot of the developers I've talked to that I've done a few of those, not much, but I've done a few of that type of product. And honestly, the retail and all that was not accretive to the deal. If anything, we were having to subsidize it. I think that product's going to continue to exist, but in very special locations, like real core CBD, where you can have a high rent tenant, maybe a Starbucks, truly a nameplate, as opposed to being 2 blocks from downtown where no casual walking by is going to help feed that retail, and that space ends up dark half the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to see a return to more conventional apartments. What I hope we get to is a place where we get better architecture. I hate the fact that you can drive around America right now, and so at least in my case, if someone's been in the business a long time, it's like, that's an 80s deal, that's a 90s deal. Oh, look, there's an 00, and that's the architecture from the 10s to the 20s. And now we're doing suburban product with flat roof, and okay, so that's the trend for the 20s. It's like sooner or later we've got to let's have some variability to our architecture, some variegation in the look and the feel of it. I have a student is from she's Belarusian, very smart young lady, and she hit me up the other day. I forget how we got on the subject in class, but she said, why is so much of the American architecture so boring? And I said, well, that's not fair. You're coming from, architecture that's 500 years old. And I can't say I disagree with you. I wish we could get back to some Beaux-Arts and some really pretty stuff, especially our civic buildings. We're seeing a little bit of that happening. Nashville Public Library, for example, is a marvelous example of, and our Symphony Hall that I mentioned earlier. That's a salute to, this is space that we want our citizens to look at and feel proud of, and that's going to be here 100 years.
Yeah.
Not here's some schlock where you got some books inside.
I know a lot of people want to know
Yes.
what in your field, since your field is very busy and there's a lot of stress involved, how do you manage all your roles, especially being a teacher, professor, and owning businesses? How do you manage all your stress?
Very good question. Really, sort of a life, I guess a lifestyle question. One of the things I'm blessed with is being a veteran, and my kids to this day joke about it. When we're growing up, that it'd be some big explosion, and oh, it's a terrible. And I kind of my standard first question is, all right, is anyone going to die? And it's like conversation stops. No, okay. Well, let's start there then. Let's work the problem. But no, how do I manage? I'm big into physical fitness. I used to run a lot of marathons. The older you get, you can't quite do that as much. I do ride both road and mountain bikes a lot. I've gotten into this rucking thing lately. I don't know if you've tried that yet, where you got a heavy pack on your back and you go hiking. That's pretty fun. That's become kind of part of my workout routine during the course of the week. I meditate quite a bit, and I mean, candidly, I'm very religious. I, was not a cradle Catholic, but became a Catholic at a fairly young age and went to Catholic schools all my life. And church is a big part of it. And I find great peace in that. And then just reading and writing on the side. I spend a lot of time, not only am I working on a real estate textbook, but I do tend to write columns and essays that speak to things I want to talk about. And I write a lot of poetry. And, I guess you could say I'm a bit of I don't like to use the term, a bit of a polymath. I mean, I just kind of keep a lot of irons in the fire. I mean, I've got what is this back here? I'm trying to, in honor of my Scottish heritage, I'm trying to learn how to play the bagpipes. This is called a chanter. And it's how you first learn to play a bagpipe. So it's just something I can play with, keep the mind active and fun.
That's always the conflict: is should you specialize or should you be a jack of all trades? And I've always gone for jack of all trades.
Yeah, I honestly I have too. In real estate, there are people that specialize. One of my former students has been extremely successful, and I love his strategy. He basically locked onto a section of Nashville 13, 14 years ago, and he works it. He started out, he bought a distressed bank processing center. There's a huge building that was bomb-proof, and he turned that into a self-storage facility on a couple floors. He's got a bagel shop on the upper floor it's straddled between two streets that are at different heights. And now he's built out an apartment community in one of the parking lots and added structured parking on the other side. Then right next door to that, he's bought like the next two or three things, and he's turned one into a small architect's office. Now there's a lawyer's office. He's got a restaurant, and he's just working it, just marching up the street. I was teasing him the other day. I said, Adam, you're gonna end up owning all of Main Street by the time you're 55. That's my goal. So that's a great way to specialize there in a sense of specializing in a geography.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at the Trammell Crow model, where they specialized in the 24-unit double loaded breezeway suburban building that 200 units on 20 acres, and let her rip, and the same floor plans over and over again. If that building's in Florida, we put barrel tile roofs on it. If it's in up here in Nashville, we put regular shingles on. But it's the same floor plan, it's the same everything, and mass production kind of model. So and they're extremely successful with that. For myself, I get bored. Honest, one of the reasons I ended up leaving Crow is I was getting bored with doing that. I wanted something different and wanted to do the historic renovation, and Crow didn't want any part of historic renovation, and said, well, it's my ticket to kind of hop off the bus, and that's what I did. So,
all right.
This is history.
And you were very successful at it too. I appreciate you coming on. I mean,
absolutely,
it was great having you.
We appreciate you, and yeah, let me know if you're ever this way. We'll get together and have an adult beverage.
Absolutely, love to.